probably, what, 5-6 months ago now for the property tax roundtable that we did there. We had some homeowners. We had some, I think at the time, Senator Blaise Ngolia. He's now the chief financial officer of Florida, and he's doing a fantastic job. And we had some other folks, I think, in the legislature that were there with us. But, the reality is we want to provide relief to people in any way that we can. I don't think we've seen a period of inflation over the last, however many years, this significant since the late 70s, early 80s. And so when you have the cost of things going up and then you have incomes not necessarily matching that, what could we do? Well, we've done a lot at the state. No tax on baby items, so people can raise families. Like literally, you don't have to pay tax on any of those essentials. We've delivered other things in terms of tax relief, but we also don't have an income tax, and that's good, and we're not going to have one. We've done so much on sales tax that all the essentials are basically exempt, at this point. If somebody from Canada wants to buy a yacht in Fort Lauderdale, that's fine. We'll tax that, right? But if you need your groceries or a diaper, then, we want to make sure you go. So we've done that. And so it's like, okay, no income tax, all these different exemptions for people. And then we've even done things like toll relief over the years where we were rebating 50% of the tolls for our commuters. So we're doing that, all this other stuff. And then it's like, okay, well, what do how can you do? And basically, people, when it comes to tax, and they don't like federal, obviously, well, because nobody wants to pay federal income tax, but they, and the payroll tax, which bites a lot of people and it bites businesses, but they're like, for the state, they don't really have anything for us. It's the local property tax that's really been a big burden, and those burdens have risen because the valuations of the homes have gone up, and the market goes up and down. We had a huge run up partially because it was going up everywhere. Even the places people were leaving still saw housing values go up during those COVID years. Florida was even more exacerbated because we were the place people were escaping from. They're escaping Chicago and New York City and all these places. It is what it is. People say, don't let any more in. Like, I don't have control over that, guys. If I did, maybe we'd approach it in an interesting way. Who knows? But I don't. So people vote with their feet. It's a free country. They do all that. So you had that. But then what happens is you'll have a house. You buy a house for $350,000 10 years ago. Now they're telling you it's worth $1 million. People that are younger, to the extent they can afford homes, because it's been tougher for people, you're coming in at a high tax basis, right? So like you could have a elderly person in your neighborhood who's had the house for 30 years, and then their exposure is capped if they're homesteaded. Then you end up with way more than that. So this is a very important issue. This is one of our first roundtables here. Just know that we're working very closely with folks who want to get something done in the legislature to put something on the ballot. Since it's local, it's got to go on the ballot. It's not something we can just do by legislation and sign into law. If we could I would just call a special session and say do it. But it's got to go in the November 2026 ballot. That's just the way Florida's system is done. I'll sometimes ask people like, when are you going to do property tax, whatever? And I tell them, watch one of my speeches or press conferences in November 2020. If there was any way you could do it before then, functionally, we would definitely do it. But it's not something you could just sign into law. It's something that the people will ultimately have to vote on. But I do think that will be something that will be meaningful relief for folks as they're working hard to make sure that they could make ends meet. And then, the other thing is they just put out a report from I think it was the auto insurance report that highlighted some of the things we've been talking about our market reforms. So you now have $1 billion that's going to be rebated from Progressive to auto policies in Florida. And then State Farm announced a 10% reduction, and other companies are now announcing reductions. And that's just because of the reforms that we did 2022, 2023 period. Takes time for those to go in. And then what happened is when those reforms were about to get signed into law, all these lawsuits got filed like at the last minute. Well, that's costly. They pass on to consumers. Well, now it's kind of gotten to where you have some stability, and people are like, man, this is really working. So that's likely going to happen. You also have 16 new companies in for homeowners insurance. Florida Peninsula announced, I think, 8% reduction. I think you're going to continue to see that. We were at the reinsurance conference last month, and everyone was saying that the reforms have overperformed, and that people are more willing to put capital at risk in Florida. You know, there was a time when people said that some people were saying Florida was totally uninsurable and then there would be no companies left. It's the opposite. So this takes some time, but you are definitely seeing that. And the fact that we didn't have any storms, I think you're going to see a lot of companies have to do that. You know, if you're entering the Florida market, the only way you're going to get business is to offer, more attractive rates for those things. And the other thing we're looking at is, this citizens insurance. When they have 1.3 million people on it, well, that's not a solvent system, but so many have now gotten private policies. I think there's going to be some ways to do relief for citizens potentially too. So we're going to work on that as well. So all that just being said, all those issues we were talking about there, we're very mindful of it. Of all the things, though, obviously the groceries and stuff has been driven by federal government overspending, debt, all that stuff, Federal Reserve. That's way beyond what a state can do, even a state as big as Florida. And so there are definitely things that are really important. But the one thing we can do, the one thing we, the people, can do, we can control the taxation levels. That is purely a government function. And this way, it's got to go on the ballot for Florida, but you guys are going to have an opportunity, to do it. And, we just want to give people the chance to be able to vote for relief. And we're probably the only state in the country that would be able to do this in a really bold and meaningful way, just given the dynamics that so many people pay taxes here who aren't Florida residents. I would rather them pay than you pay. I mean, that makes perfect sense. So stay tuned on that. There's going to be a lot to come out. But I am happy for today to be able to make some really good announcements. So joining us today is our Department of Environmental Protection Secretary, Alexis Lambert, our Chief Science Officer for the DEP, Dr. Mark Rains, as well as Polk Regional Water Cooperative Executive Director, Eric DeHaven. We have representatives from Hillsborough County, Citrus County, Hernando County, Live Oak, Inverness, Cape Coral, Lakeland, Crystal River. I was just giving Crystal River and Citrus County, we gave them a lot of money. You guys are back. Some of you guys are back. It's good stuff. Well, I always tell people, when I was a kid, Citrus County had, I don't even know how old I was, but I love baseball, and they had Ted Williams had his Hitters Hall of Fame up there, which is like a huge deal. He'd have all these guys would be down there. He'd have Mantle, DiMaggio, Willie Mays, all this stuff, and that was like right there. So I remember going to that as a kid, and I'm like, man, this is an unbelievable place or whatever. And so little did I know I'd be showering you guys with money, 30 years later or whatever. But it is what it is. Part of the reason we've done stuff in that part of Florida and other parts of Florida, we've really been given, I think, a unique ecosystem here in the state of Florida. Now there comes with challenges when you're a peninsula in the middle of a tropical part of the world. You have to deal with these storms. Obviously, this region of the state knows that very well after 2024 and even before that. This year's been great. We love it, and we're so thankful that we didn't have to deal with anything. No storms actually hit the entire continental United States. Not one storm hit, which is really good. So we just got to keep that going. So there's challenge, but the benefits are, you have maybe the prettiest place, some of the prettiest places, really in the world we have here on the Florida Peninsula. And so it's something that we have responsibility to make sure that we're good stewards of. And it's something that we want to do. What I said my first day in office, we want to leave this to God better than we found it. And we had a lot of work to do coming in. I mean, miss me. And we were at, unfortunately, we were at the the funeral for one of our deputies who was killed in Indian River County yesterday, and we were in an airport hangar, and it just started whipping and like boom, like the flag down, up, down. I mean, like they had to keep doing it. So you know, it's good. So it's just part of what you got to do when you're around here. But so we wanted to deal with a lot of challenges. I think there was a lot of frustration throughout Florida that some of the stuff, you know, wasn't being done. You know, if you go further south of here, down into Southwest Florida, 2018, this was the year before I became governor, you had massive algae blooms. You had the algae being sent out of Lake Okeechobee, mixing with the red tide, making the red tide a lot worse. You know, red tide naturally occurs out there and has for recorded history, but when it gets in with the other nutrients, you know, created really bad stuff. It smelled bad. It caused huge destruction to tourism and really undermined the quality of life. You had 2 years before that on the east coast of Florida, places like Stewart, massive algae blooms because of discharges from Lake Okeechobee. Now, those weren't discharges the state of Florida was doing. It was the Army Corps of Engineers. But you had that. And part of the reason you had all these issues is because Florida's plumbing was not working the way God intended. The water was supposed to flow south through the Everglades, which is a natural filtration system, river of grass, and then it ultimately makes its way to Florida Bay. That's better for flora, fauna, it's better for fishing, it's better for everything. And that really had been changed because of things that man did, partially in the name of flood control over the years, which we understand. But you know, the reality is we can prevent flood control and still make sure that we're nourishing those things. So we had to take a lot of important actions early on. Part of it was we wanted to work with the Army Corps to maybe manage that lake better, and they've done a much better job. There's no question about it. But we wanted to put our money where our mouth is, so we set out to really do major environmental restoration. And the Everglades was kind of the crown jewel of that, but it wasn't the only thing about it. And what I can tell you today, everything we promised, we've not only delivered, but we've over-delivered on all those promises. Across all those different subject matters, we were able to get it done. Billions and billions of dollars more than has ever been done to do these really significant projects. You look at things like the C-43 reservoir, the C-44 reservoir on either side of Lake Okeechobee. Now, when you have water, they can clean it and then send it. And then people don't care. Once it's clean, it's fine. It doesn't create the same issues. We're also working on ways to, you know, make sure the water that goes into the lake from Central Florida is a little cleaner, because there's a lot of runoff that takes place. Working on cleaning up the lake more and more that's in there. So there's a whole host of things that have been done and are continued to be able to do. But we have, since I've been governor, funded almost 1,200 projects across the state to reduce harmful nutrients in Florida's waterways. So that will cut an estimated almost 5 million pounds of nitrogen and almost 1 million pounds of phosphorus each and every year with those programs. More than so 300 of those are already complete and producing really measurable results. And so we're happy with what we've been able to do with Everglades. We do have an agreement with the Trump administration where they've delegated, because you know, it's supposed to be state, federal, we each have our roles. Most of the states don't do their fair share, and then they expect the Fed. We're the opposite. We did our share and then some, and then we tried to get Biden to step into the game here, and he didn't do it. And so we worked with the president and his administration on saying, okay, you guys are behind. Florida works quicker. Send us the money, and we'll do some of these projects. So you now have, we have 2 major Everglades projects that we started that would not have probably started for this decade had we not done it. And we're working alongside the federal government on those. And so that's a really good story we're able to do. And that whole thing with the Everglades, 5 years now, we're going to be able to finish it earlier, 5 years earlier than what the estimated date was when Biden left office, which is really, really positive, and it's a great story for everyone. So we've been able to do billions and billions for clean water, water resources, which is really important. We've also put about $300 million towards developing alternative water supply sources, and that's about 540 million gallons per day of additional supply. Today, we will build off that initiative. So I get the ability to do grants, and a lot of times it's working with local communities to, create good infrastructure so that you're able to develop really great things with respect to water supply. So I'm pleased to be here today to announce that we're going to be continuing to put our money where our mouth is. We're going to be awarding over $112 million in grants to improve water quality and supply across Florida's Gulf Coast and throughout Central Florida. So 50 million of that will be in 14 different alternative water supply grants. And this includes St. Johns River, Swanee River, Northwest Florida Water Management Districts, Polk Regional Water Cooperative, Toho Water Authority in Osceola County, cities of Cape Coral, Winter Haven, Live Oak. Once fully operational, these projects are expected to produce almost 94 million gallons of water per day. So that's a really significant thing. The population here has grown. I'm not asking anybody to move. I've never asked for anybody to move here, to be honest with you, if you go back. In fact, during COVID, they were like, oh, man, it's just like, do you want to go on, like, business recruiting trips? Because I did do that my first year a little bit. And I'm like, no, because they were calling me asking if they could, it was like, hey, I wanted you to know we're coming. I'm like, great, whatever. And so I haven't done that, but yet, people are gonna see greener pastures in some of these areas. And I've met people from just about every state, but certainly some of kind of the worst offenders, the Pacific Coast states, huge problems. Washington, Oregon, that I hear about with people leaving Portland and Seattle and some of this stuff. Obviously, Northeast has been a problem and will continue likely to be a problem in New York City going forward. Chicago, huge problem. So we see all that. But the reality is it is what it is, right? Like if we need to make sure we have strong water supply, we're going to do it. So that 94 million gallons is really good. Interestingly, they in some of the parts of the country, they're building these like massive hyperscale data centers. They take like 1 million gallons of water a day, massive amounts of water that's doing. We obviously want our water to be for the general public and not to be bogarted in that way. And we'll have more to say on that in the coming days. We also are going to do 50 million for 23 projects aimed at protecting Florida's pristine, natural, freshwater springs, and we have the best springs of anywhere in the country. Obviously, people know Crystal River, Inverness, Oakland, Williston, Archer counties, Hernando, Citrus, Levy, Jackson, and Leon counties. And the spring sheds and water quality through wastewater upgrades will be improved. There'll also be other enhancements. It's going to reduce nitrogen just in those grants by 100,000 pounds per year in those springs, and that's a really, really big deal. These efforts will help communities connect septic systems to sewer lines, among other water quality improvement efforts. Just, again, keep the water clean, make it cleaner, make it healthier. So this will bring us to $430 million for 147 different springs restoration projects since I took office. That's major momentum. And then the final thing is 12 million is being awarded to our state universities and counties to drive innovative technology to fight harmful algal blooms. 16 projects will be funded, including here in Tampa at the University of South Florida, also University of Florida and IFAS, University of Miami, Florida International University, and Florida Atlantic University, as well as Polk and Seminole counties. The Innovative Technology for Harmful Algal Blooms grant was established during my first year as governor, following recommendations from our Blue-Green Algae Task Force to invest in a diverse portfolio of technology so that we could tackle these harmful algal blooms. Since then, we've received $75 million in appropriations and have supported 68 projects that detect, prevent, clean up, and mitigate harmful algal blooms. Like our investments in Everglades restoration, We believe that reducing circumstances for harmful algal blooms along Florida's coast are very, very important, and we want to tackle that head on. So all of this stuff is really going to make a difference. And you know, it's interesting. We're going through our budget recommendations. So I'm going to do the budget announcement pretty soon. And, you know, you go through everything, you know, and it's interesting. Florida, you know, we've done very well with handling budget. Our budget, even though we have millions of more people than New York, our budget's less than half of New York's budget. But yet, you know, we have better roads, better services, better public university system, all these other things. Actually, New York City's budget is more than the budget of the entire state of Florida, and they only have 8 million people. And that's even before the deficit balloons when this guy takes over the grocery stores. I mean, can you imagine what's going to happen with that? So we, from a spending level, we're either the first or second lowest per capita state spending in the entire United States of America. And so that's our number of state employees per capita is the lowest of anybody in the United States of America. We have one of the lowest, if not the lowest, state tax burden. We're always in the top 2 or 3 on that of anywhere in the United States. And then our debt, since I became governor, by the end of this fiscal year, you take all Florida's taxpayer-supported debt since it's been a state, we will have retired more than 50% of it just in my tenure as governor. And so that's a really big deal. And then we now have the lowest per capita debt in the country. I think your share as a Floridian would be about $450. Your share as an American of the federal debt, I think, would be about 110 grand, a lot. So we've done really well on all that, but you know, we have done big things. I mean, we've accelerated infrastructure projects by billions and billions of dollars. Things like moving Florida forward, which, you know, we just did the the Howard Franklin was not moving forward, but then the 275 in Pinellas leading into that is moving. We're doing that much ahead of schedule. Doing a lot in Central Florida. Polk County, we're doing amazing stuff, and they need it because, you know, you have traffic. So we're doing all that, but that was massive investment. We've done massive investment in education, universities to keep tuition low, K-12 teacher pay increases. You know, they just did a thing in Lee County. It was incentive pay for teachers, and the school union was fighting it. And I'm just like, why would you oppose positive incentive pay for? But it's just, this is what we deal with. So, but we've put in more money at the state level for teacher salaries than has ever been done in the history of the state of Florida. We've also done major tax cuts. We did our accelerated debt repayment. So we've done a lot of stuff. But we're not like, you know, trying to socially engineer. We're just doing what I think the public thinks is good stuff, right? That benefits people. And then, of course, the environment that I talked to you about. You know, we promised $1 billion more in my first 4 years than had been done previous, and we did way more than that, and then we've done way more in second term. We're blowing away what Florida used to do on all this stuff, and it is making a really big difference, and we're happy to do that. But, you know, the interesting thing is, as we're going through the budget, I'm looking at this, we put major investments. We definitely see where we're going to be in a position where we're not going to have to spend as much on some of this stuff because we will have put the infrastructure in. There'll be operations and maintenance for sure, and there'll be some expenses, but we've basically done the heavy lifting already. And so, you know, this budget, certainly future budgets that are done, are not going to have the level of commitment that we've had because we've actually succeeded in getting the job done. And I think that's really, really good. I mean, you know, do it, get it done, and then not make it just be something that you're spending just to spend. No, we're doing this because we think it's important. We think it's important for quality of life. We think it's important for the economy, and we're going to keep doing that going forward. So I want to thank everybody that's been involved with this. I'm excited about it. I know we've got some more grants we're going to be doing in some sensitive parts of Florida that I know people are going to get excited about, so we'll be doing that pretty soon. In the meantime, we have some folks that are going to come up and speak, so we'll start with Alexis Lambert.
Good morning. Thank you, Governor. What a beautiful day to hand out some grants. I'm Alexis Lambert, Secretary of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. As you mentioned, Florida is growing faster than almost any other state in the country, and with growth comes responsibility of managing our water resources with intention. What we are celebrating today reflects a core principle of this administration. A strong economy and a healthy environment are not competing interests. When we protect our water, we protect the foundation of our tourism industry, our fisheries, our coastal communities, and our quality of life that brings families to Florida every day. Florida's continued growth requires planning for a sustainable and reliable water supply. By prioritizing the development of alternative water supplies, this administration has helped communities diversify their water sources and reduce pressure on our natural systems. The projects awarded today include efforts to expand reclaimed water, improve aquifer recharge, and strengthen water conservation. Each of these investments helps secure the long-term water resources needed for thriving communities and a thriving economy. We must also care for our natural systems. Nowhere is that more evident than in our springs. The funding awarded today advances ongoing efforts to improve water quality, reduce nutrient pollution, and protect our spring sheds. This includes connecting septic systems to central sewer and other measures that collectively reduce total nitrogen by more than 100,000 pounds a year. While alternative water supply and springs restoration projects address long-term sustainability, communities still face the potential threat of harmful algal blooms. The state's investments in technology are helping us stay ahead of these risks. Through the success of the Innovative Technology Grant Program, we now have resources for earlier detection, faster response, and stronger coordination with local partners than ever before. Today's funding will further strengthen Florida's ability to respond to blooms as they occur, while also improving water quality over time. These grants will reduce the amount of nutrients entering our waterways, remove harmful legacy nutrients, and help clean up algal blooms if they occur, contributing to a healthier and more resilient Florida. Florida is setting the standard for water resource management. We base our decisions on science. We plan for long-term resilience, and we invest taxpayer dollars wisely to deliver meaningful results. Whether improving water quality, diversifying our water supply, or equipping communities with innovative tools, each project strengthens Florida's future while preserving our natural environment that defines and sustains this great state. Thank you, Governor, and to our legislature for support of this important work, and congratulations to today's recipients.
Okay.
Now we'll hear from Dr. Raines.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Governor DeSantis, for inviting me to join you today. I'm Dr. Mark Raines. I'm the Chief Science Officer for the state of Florida, a position Governor DeSantis created to ensure that science underlies sound environmental policy and practice. Now, like many Floridians, I was not born here. My wife and I came here 25 years ago, raised a family, proud to call ourselves Floridians today. And that's a story that's been repeated many times over, right? So 1845, when we were granted statehood, there were 90,000 residents in Florida, probably very few annual visitors. Today, 23 million residents and 140 million annual visitors. A complete transformation in literally less than 10 human generations. And so why is this happening? Well, why am I here? A booming economy, affordability, fantastic weather, great water quality until it isn't, right? And because of the growth, I mean, it comes with a challenge. The challenge is protecting and restoring the water quality that we all rely upon. Now, meeting that challenge is complicated. It takes three things. It takes leadership, it takes funding, it takes a comprehensive scientific understanding both of the causes of water quality degradation, but also how we can reverse it. And fortunately, today, we have all three. We have leadership and funding from Governor DeSantis and the legislature, and we have a really tightly coordinated scientific community, the resource and regulatory agencies, non-governmental organizations, the universities, the private sector, all working together to ensure that that leadership and funding is directed to the projects that have the greatest environmental benefits. And so that's what we're doing here today. We're celebrating the most recent investment in that. The funding announced today will help us reduce nutrient loading to water bodies, and then will help us monitor, predict, and rapidly respond to declining water qualities if and when we find it, including harmful algal blooms. So think about it. Septic to sewer conversions reduces the nutrients that are in our water bodies that fuel the harmful algal blooms. We're developing cutting-edge modeling tools that allow us to predict when and where an algal bloom will occur before it occurs, and innovative technologies that we're developing that allow us to rapidly respond and suppress those algal blooms before they become widespread. So I just want to close by thanking Governor DeSantis and the legislature, not just for the funding and the leadership, but also for ensuring that science plays a crucial role in directing that leadership and funding to the projects of the greatest need. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Eric DeHaven. I'm the Executive Director of the Polk Regional Water Cooperative, and we are one of the recipients today of grant funds from the various sources that the governor announced today. So the first thing I'd like to do is give a big thank you to Governor DeSantis, Secretary Lambert, for the significant grant award for the Polk Regional Water Cooperative. This money will go directly to our Southeast Lower Florida and Aquifer Water Production Facility and Transmission Main project. Now, this project is vital to the Polk County region to ensure long-term sustainable water supplies to the citizens of Polk County, but even more importantly, it protects Polk County's diverse natural systems, such as the Peace River and our many lakes, rivers, and streams that we have within Polk County. Now, under the first phase of this project, we'll provide 7.5 million gallons per day of water to 10 Polk County cities, as well as residents within Polk County service areas. Future phases of this project will bring up to 30 million gallons per day of water online for the benefit of the Polk County residents. But as we all know, alternative water sources can be expensive. Therefore, these DEP grant awards directly assist residents by reducing our water rate increases significantly. Now, in my role, I commonly attend many city commission meetings, and I was recently at the Lake Alfred Commission meeting this past Monday. One thing that the commissioners are always expressing to me is that they understand the need for alternative water supply to reduce our reliance on stressed traditional supplies. But one of the hardest issues they have to overcome is the cost of alternative water supplies to residents. So I can't stress enough again how valuable the state grant support is to defray the cost of these alternative water supply projects. So I would be remiss to not mention the support from the Southwest Florida Water Management District and the Florida Legislature that the PRWC has received in the past. We have significant grant funds from them, and we greatly appreciate that. So on behalf of our 15-member governments in Polk County that make up the PRWC, I would like to once again thank Governor DeSantis, Secretary Lambert for the significant award and their continued partnership in our Southeast Lower Florida and Aquifer project. Thank you all very much.
All right, so this will make an impact. I'm really excited to be able to award these grants. We do have some more to come. We'll be working, obviously, with the legislature to continue the momentum, but as I said, I mean, I think that, some of the budget commitments that have been made, I think have worked. And so, I definitely see a time where, you're not going to be doing as much of the water infrastructure because so much of it has been done successfully. And you already see it. I mean, certainly in South Florida with the flow through the Florida Everglades, we've raised the Tamiami Trail. We've done all these things where you now have water flowing through there. Salinity levels in Florida Bay are in good shape. People see the flora and fauna in the Everglades more, and we're going after the pythons still, so that'll help if we do that. We've got try to have some different approaches to try to get that done, including using the private sector. But people notice that, they notice the fishing and all that. So this stuff matters. It's been good, and we're gonna keep it going. But I think that part of it is when you do the money, it's just like, if we build roads, you don't want to keep having to spend that same amount of money on that same road. Like, you build it and you go. So I do see where we're doing that. So there's some positive, I think, on the horizon for us. There'll be things we need to do to keep the momentum going, but a lot of the big investments were things we sought and we've delivered on, which is good. Okay, anyone have any questions?
Governor, on congressional redistricting, we know you announced on Monday that you want to have a special session later this spring. I believe you talked to Senate President Albert about that. A couple of things. Is your staff already working on maps? And also,
So there's nothing that anyone on my staff has done with respect to actually doing a map. But, you know, when we're going to do it, and part of it is we're going to be forced to do it, I think, because the Supreme Court's VRA decision is going to impact the current map. So just no matter what else happens, that is going to have to be addressed. I was hoping that we would get an extra seat if they, because what happened was, you know, people always tell me when I criticize the census, well, Trump was president during it. Yeah, he was president up until January 20 of 2021. Then what happened? Biden came in, he issued a bunch of executive orders. They took the data, and what was supposed to be 2 seats for Florida, by April of 21, he's been in office for 100 days, they issued the apportionment, and it was different than what people thought. And then they admitted a couple years later, oh yeah, Florida got undercounted, Texas got undercounted, they should have had an extra seat, and so each. So I was hoping then obviously that would have required it. I think at this point, the chance of that happening, I just haven't seen the movement that I was hoping from. I mean, I know there's a lawsuit with Commerce. I know they had talked about doing it. That would be for sure. But then you also have the interesting thing in Florida. When did the census stop? It stopped basically March of 2020, the end of March of 2020. Well, what's happened in Florida since then? You've had a big population, so like the districts are not well apportioned. And I don't think people are getting equal representation and that was a demographic shift that I don't know that we've necessarily seen in modern history before. But I do think the Supreme Court, they heard argument on it in October. We anticipate a decision would be rendered probably sometime in the first couple months of the year. And that obviously will be very instructive on how we did it. But it's interesting, you know, remember, legislature did a map. I told them, I was like, I'm going to veto it. If they did it, I vetoed it. Then we sent back, and a lot of it was what folks, you know, that we had some staff that did one. And people said, oh, yeah, no, we love it, Governor. We're just worried about the court. What happened in the courts? Upheld by the Florida Supreme Court and upheld, yeah, in federal, against federal challenge. I don't think there will really be grounds for a federal challenge at this point, assuming that the Supreme Court rules, I think as a lot of people anticipate, on this VRA Section 2 claim. And so basically it'll be, you know, legislature's going to have to pass maps that just comply with the Florida Constitution, you know, which does have some guidance that you got to follow, and they will. But yeah, no, and it'll be good, and we'll work to get that done.
Governor, there's been some criticism recently around the vote to buy 4 acres of Destin for $83 billion. I know the CFO objected to that purchase. What's your reasoning for that? I know
It was in the budget. So the legislature put it in the budget. So we have land acquisition program, and they put language in the budget that you've got to do this one first before you do the others. Now, it's true. Traditionally, we're buying more like farmland or some of these other things, and there's other things that have done. This is, have any of you been to Destin? You know, maybe, I mean, look, you know, Pinellas can maybe be the best beaches, but Destin could argue it's the nicest. So you have this place, and the people there love it. You have this plot, and it's 4 acres, but it's like perfect real estate. And you had a guy that was going to build condo towers, and they didn't want the condo. Locals didn't want the condo towers. So the state senator from that area put it in, said do it. And so when it came to the cabinet, you know, this was not something we just dreamt up. This was something that was put in there. And then the question was, well, how much is it worth really? And they said, oh, it's too much. Well, there were 2 appraisals done that had basically $82 million. And so it wasn't like that was just pulled out of the air. That was done twice. And if there was any reason to think that somehow you could do an appraisal differently, you know, we would have been happy to do it. But when we asked, they said no. Here's what I do know. If you built a condo tower on that piece of land, you would make way more money doing that, no question, because you could sell the penthouse lots for $25 million a pop. Every single unit in there would probably go for $2-3 million. And look, maybe the market will really go down to that, but that's just the reality. But the idea that this was just cooked up by the cabinet, no, this was put in by the Florida legislature in this year's budget, and this was the priority above all the other projects that were there. And so we went ahead and honored that. But I will tell you, the people, you know, you have some in media that have criticized. You go ask the people in the Panhandle, are you glad that that was purchased for public use now? So it'll basically be like a local park, a beach park. Or would you rather have the condo tower? It'd be like 99% would rather have the, because you can bring the boats, you can swim, you can do all this stuff there. So it is a really cool piece of land. And I think when people see it, you know, they do. And, you know, some say 100 million, some say, it got appraised twice, basically within $1 million of each other, and so I didn't really feel like there was a basis to overrule that. Like, yeah, I would like to pay $1 for things, right? I mean, like, it's just the reality. But we have this process going through that. But that was something that the legislature directed, and had they not directed it, would it have happened? Probably not. But I still think, from a public perspective, those residents and the tourists, you know, no question, they're glad that happened.
Governor, last night, obviously, you saw the special election results in Tennessee, 13, 14-point swing. A, how much of a warning sign do you think that is for Republicans heading into the midterm? And then B, are you worried that redistricting in Florida would dilute very strong Republican districts and make them more in play?
Well, the redistricting is irrelevant because they're not allowed to use the partisan data. They have to just draw and they will do that. And that's what our current map is. But just generally speaking, yeah, it was a big warning sign. You know, you have every election that's happened has been a 10 to 15 point swing, you know, towards the Democrats. That's just what's happened lately. And in fact, if you look, you go back over the last, like, probably since 2016, you had 2020, Trump had good turnout. 24, Trump had good turnout. Florida 22, we did very well, obviously set the pace. There's some others, some things, but overall, Republicans have underperformed, particularly when Trump wasn't on the ballot, because I think some of the voters will vote for him, and they'll vote for the Republicans if they're already going out, but if he's not on, a lot of them won't go and vote. And I think the warning sign is the turnout was actually about midterm level last night. So special elections can be screwy, right? Because it's only the hardcore committed people that go, and it's always the party out of power that's more motivated to vote. But this was a midterm level turnout, and you know, you had a 13-point underperformance from a year ago when the president was running. Some of this is just natural, right? When you have the party in power, the other side's more energized. They come out, they want to vote, and then the party in power, its voters, are more complacent. And so that's just the natural. That's been true in pretty much every midterm, with the exception of one or two for like the last 50 years. So I would anticipate, you know, that dynamic is obviously not going away. Now, you know, you also have a situation of, what are you, you know, delivering in the Congress? What are you delivering here? You know, honestly, like, I think even here in Florida, yeah, we've won big, but we won big because we delivered big, right? It wasn't just because we won the beauty pageant and did all that. No, that wasn't it. It was because people saw leadership. They saw following through. Instead of doing idle promises, we're actually delivering and doing things that people appreciated. So, you know, we have supermajority in the Senate, supermajority in the House. You know, based off the House's performance, you know, in 25, you know, would they keep the supermajority if the election were today? No, I don't think they would, because I think some of the voters who have appreciated what Florida's done, I think probably have been alienated by that performance. So, you know, I think even here in Florida, you know, they need to be swimming in the same direction that the voters expect us to do. It's totally fine if you campaign on something. You know, you don't have to campaign on what I believe in, but you got to tell voters what you could do. Then you got to get in and follow through. And I think the problem that they had was, they told voters basically they were going to continue to do, you know, our Florida agenda, and then they got in and they tried to unwind it, and that, a lot of our folks did not like that. And part of it was just, it was false advertising, right? You didn't tell them that. You know, if you want to stop our anti-woke higher education reforms, campaign on that in a Republican primary. Tell them you think you want to make universities woke again. See if they'll vote for you for that. Tell them you wanted to make Florida a sanctuary state, the bill I vetoed at the special session. You know, all the stuff we're doing. Highway patrol, thousands and thousands of arrests of illegals turned over to ICE. Our detention facilities we have, turning over, ICE brings deportation. We have way more. ICE has done way more deportations out of Florida than they would have had we not done what we did. But, you know, they passed a bill to make it illegal for the governor, make it illegal for me to work with ICE to help increase deportations of illegals. That was in the bill, literally in the bill. Did any of them run on that in a Republican primary? Obviously, they didn't, because they wouldn't have been able to live to tell about it. So, I think some of this stuff is just, if you do what you say you're going to do, even voters that don't necessarily agree with everything, they will appreciate that, hey, I know where these guys stand. They did it. I think it's when you run one way to get elected and then you do some other stuff. And Florida, there's just the issue, Tallahassee's far away. There's a lot that goes on in the bowels that people may not be able to see. And it's like, can you just get away with that? So I think certainly for Florida, you're going to have some of those more marginal districts. And the question is, are our voters going to feel passionate enough to come out at sufficient levels to be able to support those folks? I can tell you, in 22, people they walk over coals barefoot to come out and vote, because they understood that we had to keep the momentum going. They understood what could have happened, the 4 years prior, had that election gone the other way. So there was no way they weren't going to do it. 24. You're looking at Kamala Harris. They were all going to come out, and they did, and they came out in big numbers. 26, I think, is going to be a little bit more challenging for Republicans. Not insurmountable, but certainly an issue that let's put it this way: if I was advising someone who was running, I say you cannot bank on 2022 levels of Republican support. You can't bank on that. You can't even bank on the 2024 levels, of support. And that was a presidential year. It tends to be a little bit more competitive in some respects. Although I will say 24, they didn't even 2024. Just think about it. We were the most significant swing state for a generation. 2020. I don't know if you guys remember. I couldn't even turn on cartoons for my kids without a Biden ad saying how bad Trump was. It was like they poured so much money into this state in 2020. Obviously, Trump won, I think, by 3.5%. So fast forward then 24. Not 1 cent spent in Florida. Like, it was just like it didn't exist. Like, you've never seen it be the most expensive and then not even a competition in Florida. So I think that's obviously good, but I don't think people can bank on that level of turnout. You got to earn it. You got to go out and earn it. And ultimately, you dance with the one that brung you, right? Like, when the voters backed you and they backed you on a certain thing, stick with that. Do what you told them you would do. Don't try to unwind. I talked about these insurance premium reductions, auto insurance reductions. That was all because we did the overhaul of the legal market and the litigation reform. The Florida House, they tried to reverse that in this most recent session. I can tell you there would be no rebates scheduled. There would be no announcements of rate reductions had that succeeded. Now, they didn't campaign on that, right? So tell voters what you're going to do, follow through. Don't tell them one thing and do the other. That may be something I think that some of our Florida voters are going to be a little bit more sensitive to, maybe than some of these other states. I don't know, but yeah, look, this is a natural thing. There's a yin and a yang in politics. I always get a kick out of when people say their side wins an election. Oh, we're going to win every election going forward. Yeah, all you have to do is open a history book. That never happens. Like, it always goes back and forth, right? And so when you have a midterm, the party out of power typically does better. That's just the nature of it. It's the dynamics that I discussed, and so that clearly that was there. And the thing about it is, you remember they had to spend a lot of money in this deep red district here in Florida earlier this year. Massive amounts of money went into that. They had to spend a lot in Tennessee, as well. So that's just what we're dealing with, and I think Republicans should go into it clear-eyed. I don't know him, and I've never met him, and I don't know much about him. I got asked about that the other day, just not something that's ever been on my radar.
Governor, on Monday, DEC released a report showing $759 billion needed for repairs for the Florida State Park system. Is there a plan to address that?
Do you want to talk about what you guys are planning?
As you know, that report was required as part of a bill that passed last year, and we'll be working with the legislature and the governor's office to see how we can address that moving forward. Sustainable funding for park maintenance will be very important moving forward. Thank you.
And since you're there have been some concerns when it comes to environmental groups about SB 290, Section 3, that allows the state to sell off some of the conservation lands
That is not a bill that we've done a complete analysis on yet, but we'd be happy to follow up with you when we've done that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, look, some of the stuff that gets in these bills, well, no, because, there was the one provision which I really wanted for people in this region that said, if you had damage from the hurricanes, you have a right to rebuild as it was. I mean, like, the notion that somehow you can't, rebuild your house to the same specifications prior to the storm is absurd. And so, that was the thing. I was like, I want to make sure that that's there. I felt that homeowners deserve that. And I know they were getting trouble from some of the local governments, but, it's just, it's not an easy situation to be in. It's like there's certain things that get damaged in life. Your home is like, the most sensitive outside of life, right? So so we did. But then, there's other things that get put in there. There's things that that will get put in, like a tax package. Am I going to veto the whole tax package because, there may be one or two things that I wouldn't necessarily put in there? No. And there have been things that have been in there, in the past. And it's not like it's bad, but it's like, tax cut for this or that. Some of them are more towards, discrete interests. I'd rather just do it broad based, but it is what it is. I'm not going to veto, relief for commuters or relief for young moms on sales tax or all these other things because of that. So that's just kind of the yin and the yang of how these things operate. But I do think, kind of the 50,000 foot view is my position is, and I think most people in this state is, yes, we went from a backwater of 90,000 people 150 years ago to, or however, 175 years ago to, now 23 plus million people. And, there's some benefits to that. Some of these people come in, they pay taxes, they don't consume services, all that. But then and start businesses, move businesses, but then there's challenges with that, right? And we don't want the state to be a concrete jungle. We want to have. So that's why we did the Florida Wildlife Corridor. So you got massive amounts of land that we've put into that. How many acres have we? I mean, we've done hundreds of thousands of acres on that one, and you're able to do that. And I think that's really good. And we've done some of these others to put in conservation. But, one of the things some of the folks in the legislature have wanted to do over the years and have done, and I'll admit I was a little more lukewarm on it, but I do see some value is doing these agriculture, rural family land things where, you basically have a conservation easement. It could stay in agriculture, but it's not going to end up being a subdivision or something like that. So I do think that that's had positive impact because, the thing is like these farmers, especially if you're like citrus or something, which has been tough, they can make more money just selling to a developer than staying in business. They may even lose money during business. So this is a way where, the integrity of the land can be maintained. They could be doing that, and that helps preserve some of the character of the state of Florida. But yeah, by the time I leave office, we will have done more on that than anybody's been able to do. And it's really significant when you look at the map of it and just see how much is in that wildlife corridor. And so that's basically going to be there for people to enjoy and the nature of that for a long, long time. So I'm glad to have had a hand in that. I know we had a lot of champions in the legislature for doing it. But the agriculture, preserving the agriculture with this program, it's grown on me because I do think the alternative in many respects would likely just be, to create more concrete and to do things like that. And look, people have a right to do with what they want with it. I mean, it's not like but if there's a different way where you can change the incentives and the public ends up being better off and we can kind of keep, a buffer on some of this stuff, that ain't the worst thing in the world. And so I think it's going to be good. So, well, listen, it's been great to be here. We will be back soon, and go Bucks.